Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar where we are very happy to welcome Linda Castañeda from University of Murcia in Spain. Linda is with the Connected Intelligence Center until the end of September. And we're very excited because it gives us the chance to really get inside each other's ideas and have good arguments and identify collaboration possibilities and so forth. Linda is a professor of educational technology and pedagogy and education, but as she may explain, these words may have quite different, richer connotations in Spanish than they do in English. I'm sure that will come along in her talks along the way, because this is actually going to be a 4-part seminar, which is great, where Linda is going to explore, our current challenges and predicaments in higher education, especially around EdTech and AI. And she's using the metaphor of optics. She's going to talk about a prism, a lens, a mirror, and a telescope as different metaphors for bringing these ideas into focus, or perhaps unfocus, we'll see. And so without further ado, I'm just going to ask you to share your slides, Linda. Welcome you to your first UTS webinar, which is called the AI Prism, Refracting Education's Most Urgent Question. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you very, very much, Simon. Let me be sure that everything is okay, that you can see everything. Can you see the slides perfectly? Wonderful. Thank you very much for your hands up. First of all, thank you very much. Thank you to Simon. Thank you to the KIC for hosting me. For me, it's a very good pleasure. And it's a very good pleasure, but it's a really big challenge to be here because I'm coming from a very different environment. And this is the reason, because we were talking about doing 4 different seminars for trying to give you 2 theoretical perspectives and other 2 more practical perspectives of applied perspectives of these thoughts that I'm sure are in your thoughts and in my thoughts, even if we are from very different environments. I'm coming from the University of Murcia, and I have to say that I'm originally a quite wide open perspective person. I was born originally in Colombia, in Bogota. I live in Murcia, and now I'm here in the other part of the world, and here in Sydney with you. And what is Murcia? Murcia is basically here in the southeast corner of Spain. And Spain is in Europe. And this is the reason, because I think that before I begin, I should probably tell you where I'm looking from, because we are going to use this metaphor of optics. I'm an educational technologist, but I come from a particular academic tradition, a continental European tradition, that we says, in education at least. And I think that matters. That matters because this tradition is, of course, neither singular or not homogeneous, but it is historically treated. We treated education as something that cannot be easily reduced to schooling, instruction, or even learning. Education, in my tradition, is also concerned with formation, subjectivity, emancipation, participation, and the possibility of social transformation. So it happens within institution, but not only within institution, cannot be contained by them. When we say education, we cannot be only thinking about institutions. These differs are important because from my, at least with my experience with the dominant Anglophone traditions that I also need, that are not homogeneous as well, you normally understand educational research as around schooling, instruction, curriculum, learning, and outcomes. And obviously, I'm not suggesting that either or both are homogeneous, but I think there are a lot of crossings between the 2 traditions, but I think it's important to say this. And it's important also to say that my prism these crystals that I use for looking to the world also come from educational technology in this tradition and from critical, post-digital, and social material traditions that make it possible for me understand technology as a neutral tool. And all this year, working a bit here, a bit in education, in my education, a bit in with computer scientists, with very good people all over the world, I have become increasingly aware that we may use the same word, as Simon says, education and pedagogy and didactics, even and many others, while carrying rather different intellectual stories within it. And I think that matters enormously when we talk about AI, because perhaps some of our disagreements about AI are not really disagreements about AI. In some cases, perhaps they are disagreements about what education is and what education means. Then, after this long, long presentation, I have to say that even if I'm from the critical perspective, I don't believe it's neutral, the technology is neutral. I think I cannot imagine education without technology, many types of technology, but I also believe in critique. But I cannot believe in the critique that makes enable us to decide or act. So I'm interested in critique that keeps agency alive. And this is, I think, the point where we touch each other the most. Then in this afternoon, I want to present to you a kind of framework that we have developed in the last years that we created basically for understanding. We try to understanding not to end the debate about AI, but to make the debate richer at least. Because for us, it has been important to reflect or to think profoundly about what are exactly what we are debating when we debate about AI. Because the debate about AI is in every single conversation about education. Even we almost talk about AI. And this is very interesting, but at the same time is very exhausting when every single conversation about education is about AI, but about the same things about AI, about if we can use or if it should use. So we started not with a prism, as I'm going to present to you, but we started with a discomfort, because in these years, we had been working in talking about technology, and the most of the conversation were about if we need to use it or if we don't, in this two artificial dichotomy from my point of view. And also the other conversation, the rich conversations, were focused on what we can do with the technology, in this case with AI, and everything else became ethical. If you listen to most of these conversations, and we imagine, obviously, ethics are very important, but it's not an undefined field or a catch-all bucket. It's a very precise thing, and when we call everything but instrumental as ethical, we are losing a lot of perspectives. And those perspectives are not new. We are not invented them. There are many scholars all over the world that have introduced many nuances and many of these approaches to the study of technology. Absolutely, these scholars, Wiener, Selwyn, Williamson, Veletsianos, De Vries, Oliver, Adele, Llorens, Norman Friesen, Femberg, many others, these scholars have converged in one remarkably simple idea. Technology has never been just a tool. And take into account that all these scholars do not belong to the same discipline. Those scholars do not share even the same theoretical tradition, but they all consider something different, something beyond the instrumental part of the technology when they look at the technology. So we want to rescue, in a way, all these perspectives to introduce them in the debate, that we understand that the debate is not wrong, but probably is incomplete. And we need to make some areas of the debate more visible using a different tool, in this case, a different framework, at least to use it to look into the AI in education. It is important to say that the prism that I'm going to present to you, this framework, is not a checklist. It's a prism. So it's a way to observe the refractions, what is highlighted, what is obscured, and how these effects change depending on where we look from. So the way you use the prism is not the same as we use the prism, and it's not the same as we use for understanding how AI impact in education. So, well, obviously, the first dimension that we mentioned in the prism is this one that show us the immense possibilities that we have thanks to AI. Creating a Botero style painting. Fernando Botero is a very international painter, recognized artist from Colombia. Or if you ask for AI to do summaries of research or helping you to rethink about things, or if you use an AI to interrogate a paper, or if your students, my students in this case, all these pictures are from my students' works, if they use AI for enrich their approaches to different tasks, or for recreating painting or comics, or even for doing comparison and meta-analytic evidence for analyzing the social media in children and adolescents impact, because my students are going to be teachers in primary school. But when we think on this part on how the AI impacts instrumentally into education, we are basically thinking on how the AI is understanding better the task they perform. The problem is not asking this question. It's great to understand how AI is improving, is making new actions imaginable in education. The problem definitely is stopping here in focusing what the technology, in this case AI, does, because what optimize and how it optimized. The next questions from our point of view are more interesting, but not probably because they are less explored. The next one, the next dimension is regarding not on what we do, but on what does it means. For example, when we say we are going to use AI for questioning or for interrogate a paper, it is cognition. I know that Simon and Mosen, that we have mentioned Mr. Benjamin Bloom from a long time. If AI can perform every level of Bloom taxonomy, and I know that many people from this audience is familiar with the Bloom taxonomy, what exactly was Bloom trying to describe? If AI can perform every level of Bloom taxonomy, what exactly was Bloom trying to describe? Is human cognition, or is cognition is human? Even more, if knowledge can now be statistically generated without understanding, because another conversation is what is understanding, what exactly have been called knowledge and understanding all this time? And even more, what exactly are we educating people for? And this is an epistemological question. It's about what is learning, what is knowledge, what does it mean educate people, what is the purpose of education, what is the purpose of the knowledge, the understanding. Can an AI have understanding? Is an understanding? Is human? Do we want this? But let's go to another dimension. Remember that all these dimensions are not separated, obviously. They are all related to each other. We arrive to the one that represents everything that is beyond instrumental, and is the dark part, the ethical. What does it mean, ethical? Is not instrumental? No, definitely is not instrumental, but it's not everything else but instrumental. Well, we have already said epistemical, but now we are saying ethical. Let me tell you a story. A teacher asked an AI, or various of them, to prepare the lesson of tomorrow. The lesson includes an assignment. Students receive the assignment and they ask to their AI to do the assignment. The teachers use the assignment to receive the assignments, and the teacher uses AI to mark the work and to generate the feedback. Everyone has done exactly what they were supposed to do, theoretically. What exactly made that an educational act? Nothing in this story is technically wrong. We can even cover it as a normal thing. We can even cover it as a technical thing. But no one cheated. We can cover it, but and have the conversation about who cheated on it. But the question is that we are very uncomfortable on here. Basically because we're thinking on what kind of responsibilities are being delegated into AI, and what are the responsibilities that cannot be delegated, and why. Why is the most important thing. What kind of responsibilities emerge once the agency is distributed? The agency of doing things, the capacity of doing things is distributed between humans and non-humans, and human non-human systems. This is ethical. It's about norms, values, responsibilities, bias, privacy, transparency, and accountability in algorithmic decisions. It's not only about whatever else, instrumental things. But there are more dimensions. There is another dimensions that pointed directly to us, to people, to the teacher and the student, to the professor and the students. To maybe we are always thinking on the possibility of using AI for enhancing the content. And we are very worried for the students if they perform with an AI, if we are not talking to a student, but to the AI that makes their work. And maybe students are worried about if whoever is answering their questions is just an AI, or maybe they are both. Or maybe we are imagining institutions where the teacher and the content will be enriched by AI, or they all. The question is, what makes learning a learning relationship educational and not only merely informational? Let me tell you another story. I love stories. Imagine two students working on exactly the same assignment. One begins talking to classmates. It makes a group work. They compare ideas, they argue, they realize they have misunderstood. They argue, they organize, they reorganize, and they help each other. They help each other to move forward. All the students take the same assignment and go to, as I call them, Chari, Claudia, and Jemmy, and he is doing the conversation is faster, clearer, probably more efficient. Imagine that the both students, one in group and one with the AI, may produce the equal good assignments. They are both good. The question I keep coming back to is, who did they learn to rely on? Because now the question is, is education only about acquiring knowledge, about developing a skill? What kind of skills? Or is about becoming a part of a community of people who think together? It's about trust people. Is our, maybe if our first instinct in a task is just go and ask to the AI rather than let's think about this together, then something has changed already. And it's not just in learning, it's in education itself. And even if AI may answer questions, education has always been about learning who we ask, who we trust, and who we can become while thinking together, how we can subjectify. So what are the kind of human communities that AI make easier to build? Even more, what makes someone part of a learning community rather than just part of the information flow? Is the information flow the same as the educational flow? Is the same as the community flow? This is a social thing. This is a social part of what we see when we think about AI in education. But in the same way, in a very close way, it is also important to think about how AI redistribute the capacity to decide what education is. We're talking about politics. What talking about when a platform shapes educational choices, who's actually making the decisions? Who's actually making the decisions in terms of politics? That politics are not only in the government, but in the government of many things. We have a lot of governments near to us. So whose vision of education has become so normal that it no longer looks like a political choice. We never think that putting one button or another, or giving an order in the product of an AI tool means something in political terms, but it actually means. This is one way to understand politics, but it's another way. Imagine, I have to say that I imagined this when I was looking into one of the projects that the KIC does, and also when I was in the workshop of Simon and John 2 weeks ago, and I was thinking on the possibility of increasing the way we approach the democratic approaches of taking decisions in universities. So I was thinking on, imagine if I can ask every academic in my university one question: what kind of university do we want to become? And AI suddenly now makes it possible to analyze every response instead of reading only a sample. This is exciting. It is potentially gives more people a voice than that ever before. But then another question, many questions appear regarding this. Who decides whether the AI has represented those voices? Who gets to challenge the summary? Who noticed the disagreement that the clustering algorithm treated as outlier? AI obviously is not solving the democratic problem, but definitely is changing it, and is expanding democratic participation, but not without replacing. Can we replace or expand this space of participation without replacing the democratic deliberation? Can we do it? This is what you are thinking when you code a tool like this. Are some of the questions that you have to do are political questions. How AI redistributes educational power, who gets to decide what educational values, who participates in the decisions, and whose interests are ultimately serving. For the next, in this case, for this dimension, I'm going to start with a story. That is not just a story. It's probably a story that I have heard Imagine a university that proudly advertised itself as an AI first. Its reputation depends on offering to students the latest AI experience. But the AI is not developed by the university. We are in this moment. It's rented. The roadmap, at least of these tools, is not educational. It is commercial. The priorities are not decided by academics or by the vice chancellors or by the government. They are decided by a company. So who's really shaping the future of this university? When your educational strategies depends on someone else's product strategy, whose strategy are you actually following? Whose strategy are we actually following? What kind of education becomes possible when educational problems are also market opportunities? And as you perfectly know, and all the data we have are saying, educational technology in higher education is one of the biggest business all around. So even, and I'm very, very worried about this, can education remain a public good when its infrastructure is privately owned? This is a commercial and market problem. This is a commercial and market dimension that we have to take into account. Dependencies, incentives, the tension between public purpose and private value. And this is also talking about some questions that are some words that are always in our vocabulary when we are talking about AI. That are efficiency, personalized, not personal, personalized, optimized. Every time that we are saying that we have made this more efficient, we are understanding that efficiency in education is something, that we are understanding that personalization in education is something. And I have a lot of things to say about personalization and what is educating the optimal way to educate someone. What vision of education has this AI, the one that you prefer, quietly taught us to desire? Even more, what futures of education become imaginable and which ones quietly disappear? What is the ideological visions that we are introducing in education with this particular AI, with this particular vision of optimized, efficient, and personalized? As I have told you, well, all the examples that I have used today are from education, but Prism is not only about education. Probably you can imagine other examples, or the many other examples about research, academic writing, peer review, and journalism, science, many others. Education is simply where those assumptions become, at least for me, more visible. This Prism was created by Anayara Postigo, Amaya Arroyo, and myself, and we have written a pair of papers, a pair of pieces of knowledge about this. One is in a chapter of book that is not published yet, but was collected in 2025. And this other is a review, a literature review. Because when we did the Prism, we turned the Prism back to the research field itself. We tried to use this Prism to try to understand how the literature about AI in primary education was working. So we did a literature review, that the data, you got the data in the paper, basically. But let me show you a bit of the results. And at first sight, you might say, well, ethics is doing rather well. 18 from 27 are not bad numbers. But when we look more closely to the results, what we found is that ethical was sometimes being used as a container for almost everything that was not technical. Power became ethics, inequality becomes ethics, governance became mentioned like ethics, markets became ethics, and when everything becomes ethical, some important differences disappears. But even more, apart from this problem of do not understand the epistemological things, the political perspective, because commercial and political aspects basically appear but sporadically, and they never appear related. They appear always in isolation. The conversation is very fragmented. These dimensions, instrumental, ethical, epistemological, political, social, commercial, and ideological, are rarely examined in relation to one another. So they don't connect. We create this prism as a very relational understanding. We are not understanding AI in a holistic way. We are understanding some fragments about this. What we found on this revision was not only a gap, we found a fragmented gaze of AI in education, and was very, very difficult, was very interesting. I know that I have been 34 minutes until now. We have spent at least 34 minutes looking through the prism, and I don't want to finish this conversation without having a time for look at the prism itself. Because one of the things that I love the most about metaphors is that I love metaphors. Metaphors are wonderful tools, but they are also dangerous, especially the beautiful ones. And I love this metaphor. It's mine. But precisely because I love it, I need to think about it. So I understand that it's important to try to look back on the metaphor itself and see what are the imperfections of the metaphor. And I want to present to you at least 3 of those. The first imperfection, the first problem that has this metaphor of the prism is that I love the prism because the prism reveals complexity. Yeah, it's not just a lens, it's a prism. But there is a danger. A real prism in a lab is neutral, but AI systems never are neutral. They all embody design decisions, business models, data set, institutional priorities, values. Every single AI includes its own different things. So it's not a neutral prism. They are also, and it definitely make what the prism makes visible is different depending on that. The next problem of our lovely metaphor is that when we think in a prism, we always think in the light, the white light that is refracted into different colors. And I think the white light was never white. Even it was never white light. Education never was just a white light. Education has never been pre-technologist. Always technology, education never exists before technology. Education had never been pre-technological. Writing was technology, buildings are technology, books are technology, timetables, examination, buildings, and all of this are technological tools. So we cannot imagine education as a pure light that we are refracting thanks to the prism, the pure prism of AI. They both are very complex. And the third problem that I think this metaphor has is that the AI, the prism, do not reveals anything. The prism do not reveals anything that is important. We do. The work of revelation belongs to inquiry, not to technology. Technology only creates the conditions that invite different questions. But whoever does the revelation is us, or is whoever is looking at this. So, and probably you will say, why Linda is saying this? Now she's not presenting the framework, now she's doing a critique. Well, I think it's very important I think it's powerful to critique your own metaphors and to think profoundly on your own metaphors. The goal of a good framework is not to survive criticism. I love to think that the goal of a good framework is to deserve a good criticism. So the value of this prism is not that this is true. The value of the prism is that it helps us to ask better questions. It's not the importance of the relevance of this framework is not to being a truth, but to serve as a productive catalyst of a thought. And now perhaps definitely it's your turn not to apply my prism. Please do not imagine that you need to fill 7 boxes. I only want to turn the question back to you. Think about whatever you're currently doing with AI, a model, a paper, a policy, a tool, a learning design, an institutional strategy. Have you interrogated it properly? Not only for what it can do, not only for whether it's ethical or not, but for the education that is helping to build, to produce. And what vision of the education is quietly being more possible than another thanks to this that you're doing. Now, I have to say that you have spent this seminar looking through the prism, and you're not outside what you're studying, you're inside. So this is an invitation for you to take a look on the prism, to take a look on your work, and to continue the conversation with your own questions about your own developments. So thank you very much. And think on what kind of education is your work with AI helping to produce. I'm pretty happy to be here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Linda. Real and virtual applause for you there. A great provocation. So much to think about, and it was coming at us thick and fast. So what is sitting with you? What is sitting with you right now from what Linda was saying there? Just put your digital hand up and form an orderly queue, please. I'm English. We like queues. All right. Jan, kick us off.
First of all, to say thank you. That was very, I'll be processing it for a bit, but lots of things that really made me think about the lens, the prism as a way of thinking about this. But one thing that struck me was in the beginning of thinking about how we understand education and who it is that understands education and who it is that's making the choices about, the political, what do we opt into? And they're very different people. So we have the educators who are trying to kind of build a deeper understanding of education, of learning and teaching, as a socially constructed process. And but there's still a lot of conservatism in universities, as we know, around that. And I would say in our leadership as well. And what I'm pondering is really at what point do we start to see there's a tipping point of a loss of something, because people realize late that the decisions they made have lost something that is that engagement, that is, the other qualities of education you were talking about, the community and the example of giving the student talking to peers versus the student just talking to AI. At what point, when does it start to become too apparent? Is it too late? Are we too far down the road? So I don't know that it's to be answered, but it's to kind of think about how you bring the sorts of concerns into a space to be able to be debated and discussed together with the right sorts of people. I don't know if that made much sense, but so it's not so much a question. It's a pondering. It's a pondering of that.
I think it makes all the sense in a way, because every time that we try to open the debate beyond the typical spaces, we always think on, maybe it's too late. Maybe maybe people are too busy trying to survive too, and they don't have time for doing these important questions. And actually, in universities, there is a lovely book that is called The Good University I don't remember. Yeah, that it says that we never have time for important discussions because we are always with the urgent discussions. We are always trying to survive. The problem is that universities are, we are in a very important moment where we are deciding if we are surviving, especially research focused universities and other higher education, public education institutions, where maybe doing these questions are a question of survival. If we don't answer these precise questions, maybe we are going to quit, because if we only talk about instrumental things and just being able to see the ethics, we are just going to provide a service that many other institutions are providing cheaper, in a cheaper way, in a more efficient way, but without doing this conversation. So I think at some point these conversations are going to be fundamental. I don't know, how do you say when you need something to survive?
Yeah, and I guess
yes.
what I was thinking with was, is it at a point of failure or something that happens that actually makes people realize, oh wow, that is big. And I say that, you know, an example I have is when AI struck this university and, you know, the sector. And the first thing we did was to try to engage audit and risk, to say this is a big risky thing that isn't go. Come and engage with us. Come and engage. And for years, you know, we're engaging with, and there was just no sense of engagement. But it was only when an audit was done after some time that audit actually then revealed, oh, there's all these problems. We need to do these sorts of things about it, which are the sorts of things we've been proposing. But it was only when it started to become very apparent, when people were more socialized, they started doing their own analysis. And that still, you know, it still engages people, but I think it's that challenge, isn't it, of engaging people before they're aware of what the consequence could be, and they may not have had the capacity nor the time.
And we are always trying to survive to the amount of work. And I think this is a very big problem. In universities, for example, I think the most important concern of every single professor or tutor or whatever is, I have too many things to do. I have too many classes to teach. I have to solve this thing, and I cannot have more time for thinking on abstract things. But definitely it's something that we have to think at some point in terms of design.
Got my actual hand up rather than my virtual hand up. Thanks so much, Linda. I think it really got me to, because I'm working more on a, you know, on a course level with academics on designing curriculum. But I think I've always got to think back to, you know, when we're thinking about using these tools with students, something you said sort of made me think about, you know, there's always a cost to us using these tools. And it's not like, you know, there is the environmental impacts, things like that. But what's the cost in terms of students processing, learning? Like we talk about things with learning as sometimes there needs to be friction, like you need to be challenged to be able to get through and then get to the next point to sort of build your learning. So I think that that's made me really think about, you know, when we're working with academics and discussing what kind of tools we might use or what assessments or activities we might be designing with them, to think about what's the cost that we're giving up in getting the students to start thinking about, like, you know, grappling with things like where can we use it, where it's going to smooth some of that processing and thinking, but also then where are we not to use it because we want them to grapple with those things. We want them to sort of almost not struggle, but, you know, feel challenged. So when do we, you know, ease off with it, and when do we use it? It's really helpful to think with that kind of part of the prism, maybe.
Simon, do you want to talk right now, or then I do it?
I'll let you respond. Yeah.
Yeah, please. I think that's true. The question is that most of the conversations that I have had with teachers when they are trying to struggle on how to use AI in their classes is we still have are thinking our courses in terms of contents. And the reality is that the real friction is beyond the content. So we are still thinking, as teachers, as professors at the faculties, we are still thinking on how to, in one way, or how to collect all these concepts and follow the thinking of my students to see that they all have these contents on their minds. That is very, very complicated. On the other hand, how to fulfill the amount of time that I have to fulfill with them. Yeah, many of my teachers are telling me, no, it's okay that they use AI, but come on, they are doing it in 2 hours. And my assignment was previously 20 hours. And I said, what is the problem? The problem is time. The problem is how many hours? What is the point? Yeah, what in the reality? Yeah, but I can do it without AI. The question is that the reality without AI, the professional reality without AI doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. So what are we teaching people to the science fiction life? What is the point? If we need to, and this is a long conversation. Obviously, I'm not saying science fiction to my professors from chemist, because probably they became a bit more skeptical. But definitely talking to them in terms of, okay, let's think on what a chemist do today. And I always do the same questions to them when I start to help faculties or whatever, because I do it sometimes. I always say to them, imagine that you are a chemist today working in a big company, in a big pharmaceutical company or whatever. Think on your course and now tell me, what are these things that you definitely noticed when you met someone working on this industry from your course? How do you detect, how you notice that this person is a good professional on it? This is the thing that we need to evaluate when we are going to teach them. And how are we going to teach them on them? What would be the way to arrive to this goal? Goals are changing. Learning goals are totally changed, but we are not having space because all of our regulations at the universities are focused on contents, times, competencies, but we are not talking about agency. We're not talking to redistributing things. We are not talking about many other things that are, I'm sure, that are more important and more institutional, because we are always continuing with the conversation in terms of the professor must do something, but this is not on the shoulders of a teacher. This is too much. It's about the institution, the regulation, the courses organization, what the university expects from me, from students, and so on.
Go for it.
Are you muted? I think.
You were first, Simon.
No, it's all right. You go.
Okay. Just this comment about, people who are always thinking about content and time and what they have to do. And that dilemma that when students are engaged in these things that we want, like critical thinking, questioning, critiquing, they are thinking about questioning, critiquing something. There is a content there as well as a process.
Absolutely.
And, when experts are engaging with AI, asking it questions, they've got that whole concept of, the knowledge base of the field, what fits with where, what on what basis they can assess those kinds of truth claims. And so I'm just really interested in your thinking about where we sit in terms of that, how we're developing students' learning in the context of AI, where we know that they're going to use it, we know that our professionals use it.
There is one thing that I always explain very much, and it's my fault. I'm sorry, but because I always say that the question about the content and the time, but the content is not wrong. There are not competencies in the vacuum. Competencies are always based on content, always based on knowledge. Yeah. And from my perspective, one of the biggest, I always think, I always talk in this way of maximize the things, but I'm not thinking that final things. I have more contradictions in my head, but I always talk in very big assertions. And probably because it's not no, in Spanish, I'm the same. Well, anyway, we don't need teachers to facilitate. Teachers are nice facilitating, but our professors are specialized people that knows very well their professions and their knowledge in a very profound way. And this is crucial. This is the way, this is the value of them. The value of my professors is not that they can perform a lecture on some kind of basic knowledge, because most of the bachelor degrees knowledge is basic knowledge about something. Their big questions, their big things are their expertise on this professional thing. So having the conversation of what means teaching and what means educating people is not a simple conversation. It's a very profound conversation that they must be part of. I cannot say a clue on how an engineer must be educated. Well, I can say some things from the pedagogical point of view, but come on, I'm from the educational faculty, the Faculty of Education. There are many people that has to take part in this conversation about what is AI changing in the human role of an engineer. And this conversation must be reflected on what we do in the school, at the university, in our learning designs. And it's regarding something about the content for sure, but it's especially regarding about how the tasks, how the agencies are redistributed or not, how the politics about engineer must be, how the business are transforming the way we do. And all these conversations must happen in our faculties. The problem is that we are not having time for them, probably. I don't know. It's more or less the okay. Simon.
Okay, I have 25 questions, but we'll just take one for the moment. Luckily, we have several months to talk about this. Now, you and many other sort of critical theorists of EdTech are quite against optimizing and personalizing the student's learning experience. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that. That's the impression that I get from reading them. And I'm sure you problematized with very big capital letters, personalization and optimization. So I just wondered whether you could unpack that a little bit for us, because,
of course,
I mean, obviously you would understand the arguments as to why these are a good thing to do. So what's the problem?
What's the problem? The problem is the simplistic vision of optimized and the very simplistic vision of personalization. When in the next seminar, we are going to approach the personalization thing, but in a more profound way. But one of my problems when someone says, I'm going to optimize the way you learn, is that we don't understand very well how people learn. Actually, we don't have many clues on how learning happens. Actually, we know some things about how and where the learning happens, but when most of people says we are optimizing the way people learn, they are saying we are optimizing the way people consume information. They are understanding that teaching people is making them following you doing something. We're still in that moment where we say, no, we are going to optimize the way people teach other people. But teaching is always understood as something that includes a lecture and then an evaluation with an exam in the end. And when these kind of simplistic approaches appeared, I'm really against. But at the same time, I think that there are many ways to optimize different parts of the learning process. Every time that I put these capitals, those capitals are very simple if you see in the design. And I'm very against the simplistic vision of education and of learning. I really believe that every time that someone tell me, no, this is the moment where we, with this fantastic tool, we are going to change everything for better, I say, oh goodness, thank God, you're coming and changing everything that we have struggling for ages in education with just one tool. And this is very simplistic, and I'm sure that you agree with me. Everything is very complex, not only complicated, complex. So thinking on, for me, I'm not against the use of tools for improving different processes. I love the use of the profound use of tools for increasing, for enriching the perspective of learning, because I really believe on learning as something rich and important for people and humanly important. So, and I think that the most important thing is not personalized in the way that a tool can tell me how make this more personal for me. If this is the case, this is not personalized. This is a machine telling me what is the pattern that the machine considers that is better for me. And this is very anti-education. In education, at least in my tradition, when we say educación, we are always optimistic. We always think that people can change. And when you think on personalization in the way that machine learning, that normally we think on data can personalize for someone, we understand that people is just a question of data that can predict the future of a person. And I don't believe on that. And I know that don't believe on that, that sounds very much scientific, but definitely is a conviction that is behind the science that I do. So I believe on personal. I believe on the way to do tools and to create tools for make more personal the learning. But and I think some personalizations are really great, but I think a tool cannot solve the complex problems of education. Neither a tool, neither a bunch of tools. We need to take human decisions for this.
Well, obviously one cannot argue with a response that says we must not oversimplify everything, because who would want to argue for oversimplifying everything, right?
There are many people that love oversimplified.
Within the AI and education field, there are many forms of personalization, and so I think we need to take each of these on their own terms and ask what are we trying to do here, and is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Right now, there are certain skills and forms of knowledge that are quite well understood now through the learning sciences, right? Which allows us to build geometry tutors, algebra tutors, anatomy tutors, etc., because we understand the kinds of problems students have understanding these things. And there is it is possible to say, look, having taught thousands of students the same thing for decades, we now understand that there are certain threshold concepts. We understand it makes a lot more sense to sequence things in these way, and there is an optimal path that I'm trying to get you from your current position to this endpoint, because there's just a lot of knowledge to master. Okay, so these adaptive tutors are going to step me through, and if I'm struggling with a threshold concept, then we'll back out, or we'll try an easier problem first, etc., etc. Okay, but so that's the sort of adaptive pathway, right? Now, if that's used not to replace the whole of a university education, but to teach a very well understood skill and go at my pace and adapt to me, I want to see a robust argument that is a bad thing. Another example would be, now we have chatbots, right? It can hold a dialogue with me and respond to what I say. And if I'm really into basketball, it can give me a basketball example of the physics problem. Or if I'm really into knitting, maybe it'll give me a knitting example, right? I'm making these up on the fly, but this is not science fiction. Now,
Simon,
why one would object to that kind of thing in principle, I'm not sure. If it's done badly, then we can all disagree with it. But if it's done well and students make better progress than they were before, why would we be worrying about that?
There are two different things. I love the idea of using a tool for improving the learning processes. But do you think that in your examples, your vision about what learning is a very individualistic thing? Is that the majority of this, I'm not saying that this is not worth to be used. I love the idea of using these things for individualized examples, for individualized approaches, for helping people to be, for helping some content to be more close to not only the interest, probably the context, the way of seeing the world of someone, but this is a vision of learning as an individual thing. In most of those approaches, what is behind is a conceptualization of learning as something that happens in the mind of someone. And this is the reason, because most of them are based on the individual vision of the learning. For us, for my tradition, education is not a question of a person. It's a question of a community. It's a question of how we built a community, how we built a community that feels, that subjectified, that changed the world, that challenged the status quo. So I understand that these adaptations and these adaptive systems can be very useful, but are not the ultimate things. And I wanted, and the most important thing is that I don't accept to the perspective that this is enough and this is good and this is good enough, because in some cases it's basically more important to see where are them. It's more important how situated the learning is than how the psychological approach or the neurological approach of learning is, because it's a question of humanity and of community. Mm-hmm. So I definitely not against whatever adaptive system. Actually, I think there are adaptive systems that are really interesting and that are adding a lot of value to the work in learning. But it's not. It's also a question of tradition. I don't understand learning as a personal, as a individual thing. Either education.
I think to get better dialogue going between the critical edtech community and the people who are like in AI ed community, learning analytics community, edtech system builders, we just need to make sure that we're not having straw men, right? Straw men being, a sort of, those tech AI people, they just want learning to be an individual sat in front of a screen for their whole life. No. There is a place for that.
Yeah, of course.
And then we want socialization, and we want communities of inquiry, and we want epistemic ownership, and we want critical thinking, and we want learning outside of the classroom, right? But the problem is, to my mind, there's too often a sort of a fake argument put up within the critical edtech community that says, this is all these people, this is their vision of learning, and it's a sort of totalizing, caricature, right?
So absolutely.
What I want to see is for us to get beyond caricatures and actually talk about things, appropriately scoped, etc. Okay.
But it happened in the both ways, because sometimes people that are doing the big techie things, and I'm one of the other from the other side. I'm not in the edtech community even. Well, I am. I'm one of the critical ones, but I'm not considered one of the people of the critical community, because I'm just a professor from a place in the middle of nowhere in Spain. So, but what I feel is that many times the people who develop these big things just ignore or just try to ignore the social things because they are too complicated and they are not into our things. And if they don't know how to code properly, probably they don't have many things to say. And they are always talking about theoretical things. So this dialogue, and this is the reason because I am here, actually, I think it's very important. Repack our knowledge to make more interesting and fruitful conversations.
Absolutely, yeah. That quality, higher quality dialogue is what I'm looking for. It's after 5, so if you have to go, then please do. But Linda's generously agreed to stick around when if there's more questions, and I can see Mohsen has his hand up. So go for it, Mohsen.
Thank you, Linda, for that wonderful presentation. I mean, you took us through a wild ride, and I enjoyed every bit of it. It was covering lots of different, it was just like looking into a prism. So all the scattering light and everything. Thank you so much. That was a really nice example and analogy. I was just thinking about the last bit of a discussion that you had. And I think the marketing side of it, as they do, it's not just that they try to simplify it, but they, in many cases, try to overclaim what the product that they have actually does without the actual rigor and academic rigor that's needed to be there. So for somebody who's not really familiar with the stuff like this, okay, it's a beautiful website, right? And the product looks promising and everything.
And fancy.
And yeah, and all the text seems to be right, huh? And then they get into it, and then it builds this false confidence that they, okay, now I have the competence and the capacity to go and succeed. But then when the real deal comes along and they have to, and I will give you an example of this, and they get into the part of their life, the position that they have to perform, it doesn't work. For example, there's lots of entrance exams for different things. And there's lots of people who develop systems for these kinds of exams to prepare you. And then you get in we promise that you make it and all that good stuff. But then it creates this false sense of security, if I may, that doesn't work. So I just wanted to add that, yeah, it was a fascinating discussion. Yeah, thank you.
I think they are, and I think there are a lot of people selling. We say in Spanish is selling smoke. They're selling smoke. The snake potions is snake oil, snake oils.
Yeah,
and there are, and this is where people that actually think properly on the design of things, because I love to see. Well, I have had some really nice conversations with you, Mos, and with Simon, with some of you, about the incredible things that can be done when you look profoundly on what is behind the fancy thing, the fancy appearing of the fancy look of an AI tool. So definitely it is. The question is that we need to convince the people who make decisions and to sell the things, to show. We need to repack the things for them to understand what are the important things beyond the fancy things.
Okay, let's wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Linda, for kicking us off with a very sparky, refractive, rainbow-colored presentation. I want to remind everybody to come and join us for the second seminar, which is on the 5th of August. And that's where we will hear part 2. You can get all the dates for these events on the KIC event website, which I've just put in the chat there. So thanks very much, Linda, and we look forward to continuing the high quality dialogue.
Yeah.
And arguments, of course.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Goodbye, everybody.